A lot of people think learning to fly is the toughest thing that they ever done. It at least is to me. But for Ash Ahuja, aka Flying Wheelie, this challenge took a whole new dimension. After being paralyzed at the age of 11, Ash thought his dreams of becoming a pilot had crushed until he immigrated to the US. Let's hear from Ash on his journey of becoming a pilot and the challenges he faced along the way.
A 6-hour round trip to go flying for an hour or two. I think just being in a wheelchair when you can fly, it's such a big difference.
And also I hear that you had an emergency landing, so tell me about that.
Now he wants to inspire more people with disabilities to learn to fly.
Alright Ash, thank you so much accepting my offer to be to come on my channel, so that's really nice of you. I wanted to hear from you. Tell me more about you, please. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely, Chris. Thank you for the invite. So my background is I've been in a wheelchair since the age of 11, and I always wanted to be a pilot because my father was in the Indian Air Force, and so I've grown up all over all the different Air Force bases in India before moving to the US about 24 years ago, and I really was keen to get into flying even though I was paralyzed, and I saw these wheelchair pilot clubs in the US, and I kept looking for them, kept trying to find them. Finally, I found a place in Atlanta, and I thought, okay, this is something I can do. That was a long time back. That was almost like 2006, 2005, 2006. And then I came to Southern Cal on a business trip, and I managed to find that they had this glider club which had hand-controlled gliders. So I took a flight there. So that really, I got really excited after doing a flight in Atlanta, in a Piper, then did a flight in SoCal, and that's when the bug really bit me to say, I gotta figure out a way to become a pilot. People are doing it, why am I not doing it? It's okay if I'm in a wheelchair, I need to figure this out. So that's how the bug started, and then I kept trying to find on the internet places that are doing training for pilots, and by that time I had moved to Connecticut, in the New York, Connecticut area, but I found a place, it was called Philly Sport Pilot. They had a Sky Arrow with hand controls on it, which is a light sport plane, and they had just started Philly Sport Pilot. I saw it, I signed up. I think I was the first wheelchair pilot that they graduated from there, so that was 2009.
So when you started, maybe you took your discovery flight or something like that in Atlanta.
Right.
Was that in a normal airplane that did not have a hand control, right? Is that what it is?
Actually, that was in a Piper which had hand controls which were bolted on. So they were not designed by Piper. They were like these, it was a very crude, I have to say, some people fly with those hand controls in Cessnas and Pipers, but they're bolt-ons. You're still using one hand for rudder, one hand for mixture, one hand for throttle. Now what do you do with, your flaps and your yoke and your, all of the other mixture controls? So it's not very well designed. So I tried it, and I found it to be too much of a difficult thing to fly with those hand controls. So that's when I found the Sky Arrow. I was really excited because it's a really well designed plane with very easy to use hand controls. One hand is on the stick, one hand is on the hand control for controlling rudder and throttle, and you don't need to take your hands off for anything. Flaps maybe to put flaps down, but that's about it. So that was when it really the bug bit me to be like, okay, this is something I can do.
Okay. You also told me that you were driving several hours to get to the flight school.
Yes.
And what was that like? Like people would be looking at you like crazy. Are you crazy? Why are you doing that?
I know. So I was living in Stamford, Connecticut, and this place was the southernmost tip of New Jersey, at the New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware border. And it was 3 hours one way without traffic.
Wow.
So going through all the New York traffic, the George Washington Bridge, like the craziest bottlenecks on I-95 going all the way down. But I was determined, so what I did is I think for almost a period of 3 months, I took all the Fridays off work. And so I would either go Thursday night or Friday morning, I would drive down, try and fly Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Sunday evening drive back so that I could go back to work on Monday and stay in a hotel. So I've stayed in all kinds of little shady hotels around there, and just to do that. And even after training, every time I had to go flying, it was a 6-hour round trip to go flying for an hour or two, which was, in my mind, it was worth it because I think just being in a wheelchair when you can fly, it's such a big difference. And just like even driving, when I started driving back in India, it was a huge confidence booster. Flying takes that to like another, 1,000-fold further.
Wow. So yeah, you are very determined to get your pilot license. I think it partially, or maybe to some extent, your father has inspired you. You said he was an Air Force pilot, so that's, you're kind of in your blood is like, hey, I wanted to be able to do that too.
Yeah, I got paralyzed when I was 11, and I always wanted to be in the Air Force. I always wanted to be either a fighter pilot or a test pilot. Grew up in Air Force bases, like even in kindergarten. The kindergarten was, the wall was common with the airport, so I would see all these Mirages and MiGs and all these fighters taking off, landing through our window while we were in class. So, and I would see when my dad was flying in or flying out, he flew transport planes. I would see those all the time, and I always wanted to be in the Air Force. But then when I got paralyzed, I thought, okay, that's not going to happen ever. Till I came to the US and saw, oh, it's not a done deal. I still can pursue this. I just need to figure out how.
Yeah.
Amazing. And even growing up, like, because my dad was in the Air Force and then he was all doing other jobs after, every chance I would get, I would, anytime we would go to like a flying club or a smaller airport, if I saw gliders or saw small Cessnas, I would try and force him to use his contacts to figure out a way to take me up for a joyride, right? For a fun flight. So I think that also added to it, and I'd been flying, I think I had Microsoft Flight Simulator version 1.0 onwards, like literally every version, all flight simulators I would fly. So it was in my blood to just look at flying from every angle. I've done drones, I've done RC flying. So, but all of that still doesn't come anywhere close to flying yourself in a plane. It just doesn't compare.
When people look at you, they might have a sympathy or empathy. What's your take on that? I mean, so when compared to what you did, learning to fly, that's in itself, in general, with having 4 working limbs, it's a hard thing to do. But you were able to do that. I mean, how do you?
It's pretty cool. I think most people are surprised that oh wow, you can be a pilot. That's crazy, because you're right. Being a pilot is a big deal for even normal able-bodied people. So that's a big deal. The most surprising thing that I also find is a lot of pilots don't know that people in wheelchairs can be pilots. That is also, I found, of course, people in wheelchairs don't know, regular people don't know, but even pilots don't know. So every time I meet pilots, they are surprised to be, wow, how do you do the rudders? What do you do? Do you just fly the Ercoupe, which doesn't have rudders? I'm like, no, that is an easy plane to fly. But yeah, a lot of wheelchair pilots fly those. But yeah, you have a lot of planes with hand controls as options that now are available. Sadly, I think all of them are non-American planes, which is a sad thing. Charles from Able Flight and I have tried working with some other manufacturers, but I don't think they're still on board with designing hand controls. Most of the hand control planes are either Italian, Brazilian, Ukrainian, a lot of European planes, Australian planes. Downside.
Okay, so you were talking about certified airplanes. What about on the experimental side? Can an RV, something like an RV7 or something like that, can that be built with?
In fact, I've seen RVs as well. There are 2 RVs that I've seen that have hand-controlled options on them. One was by the founder of the company. He built a hand-controlled design. I think there is one flying with that design. There is an RV in Europe, I forget where, I think it's in Italy, where the guy is actually doing air races in an RV6 with hand controls. So, I mean, with the experimental, sky's the limit. So a lot of people have been flying those. Zenith is an experimental plane that they have at least 4 or 5 of those with hand controls flying in the US. And they're using, in fact, one of them which was factory built, so that is certified, which has hand controls that Able Flight is using still for training pilots.
So what do you think the issue is?
I think it's just lack of motivation, to be honest, because if you see the design in the Sky Arrow, it is such an elegant design. It's completely hidden. So the Sky Arrow that I was flying in California before I got my own plane was the pilot who owned it, Paul Tanks. He did not need hand controls. He was an ex-Navy pilot. He's been flying on carriers, landing, flying Navy planes on landing on carriers. He just happened to have a Sky Arrow that had the hand control option, which is so well designed that it's invisible till a pilot in a wheelchair needs hand controls. You just stick a little T handle in it. Now it's got hand controls. So the design is so unobtrusive and so seamless that if more manufacturers did that, and all you're doing is linking up the different rudders and cable controls with one more lever that's moving them in a more seamless manner. And there are at least 20 different designs that are available that a manufacturer they don't have to design it from scratch. They can just say, okay, do we use a stick or a yoke or a center mount, side mount, and just do it. I think they just have so much demand from regular pilots that just the economical motivation wasn't as great, I think. In spite of the fact that Able Flight was giving them a grant to design, they were paying them thousands of dollars to design the hand controls. Even then, it was not enough because, they're selling enough planes right now.
Tell me more about Able Flight. Last time I heard about Able Flight was through Jessica Cox. I mean, she was, if people don't know her, she doesn't have any arms, so she uses her feet to do everything, including eating, putting on her makeup, flying, driving, and everything else. So she's pretty impressive. Tell me more about Able Flight and what people can do to support Able Flight.
Yes, thank you. Able Flight, it's an amazing non-profit organization. They have, I think they have given pilot certificates to close to about 90 or 100 pilots already in wheelchairs with disabilities. Every year they give certificates to about 10 pilots. They train them for 2 months in I think it's still in Indiana University, where they would fly in 3 different hand control planes, 2 Sky Arrows and the Zenith, and they would get 10 pilots, and they pay their this is full scholarships. They pay the entire training cost, plane time, CFI time. I think the only thing, I'm not sure if they pay for the travel and lodging, but I think they might even be doing that because it's a pretty good scholarship. And then during Oshkosh, they give them the wings during a full ceremony at Oshkosh with big pomp and show and media presence, and it's an amazing organization. I would say anyone who wants to get into flying, who has not just being on a wheelchair, but even if you have, like you said, Jessica, who doesn't have arms, or if you have other disabilities, if you're that you think might prevent you from getting a pilot's license, definitely apply to the scholarship program at Able Flight. They do it every year, so now it would be open for 2025 because I think 2024 slots would be full. Just plan for it and do it.
Like Ash said, he would like to inspire more people with disabilities and learning to fly. There are 3 ways in which you can support Ash. 1, going directly to Able Flight and donating. 2, supporting me on this channel. Any money that I make on this video now or in the future will go in support of Able Flight. 3, by supporting Flying Guys Optics. You can get 10% off when you make a purchase on Flying Guys glasses using my link below, and any commission that I make on your purchase will go directly to support Able Flight. So now you don't fly Sky Arrow anymore, so you fly a different airplane. So tell me about your new ride.
Yes, so the plane that I fly now, it's a Paradise P1. It's a light sport. It's made in Brazil. Very similar to a Cessna 150 in terms of the design and the V-speeds. They're similar in many aspects. The reason I got the Paradise and not the Sky Arrow, there's not enough storage to carry a wheelchair. So the Paradise was, I think in Brazil it was designed as a 4-seater, but to meet the light sport requirements in the US, it's registered as a 2-seater light sport with the light sport weight limitations. But it has a lot of room at the back because of the 2 extra seats that it originally was designed with. So if I'm flying, I can have my wheelchair, bags, everything at the back. There's enough room for it, and that's what we did. In fact, when I bought it in Florida, and then flew it with the pilot who I bought it from all the way to California, and it was both of us, our bags, the wheelchair, a wheelchair power assist that I had, and it had room for everything.
I believe that's a record too, with the pilot with disabilities to be able to fly coast to coast pretty much.
Yes, that was. I found out. In fact, I was speaking with Charles from Able Flight, and I wanted to find out has anybody else done this yet, and he said no. He knows of another pilot who rode along in a flight, but that was not a hand control plane. So he was just as a passenger. He said, but you're the first one that's actually been in a hand control plane who's flown it from coast to coast, literally from coast to coast, Florida to California. So that was quite a thrill to find out I was the first one.
Yeah, I'm never able to do that. One day I wanted to do that, so coast to coast flight is definitely in my bucket list, and you were able to do that.
It's an amazing experience. It's absolutely amazing experience, and whatever we thought we would do, because it was weather was coming in, so we changed our airports, changed our alternates, we looked at where there are hotels available, where there's not. So we had a plan, but we kept changing it based on weather and conditions and all of that to make sure, we were trying to avoid the weather at all costs, as much as possible. And it was really nice to do that flight. Highly recommended for anyone who's not done it. It was quite an experience.
So tell me a little bit about your typical flights. Like, I'm just talking about, people would have a question like, hey, how would you get onto the airplane, and how would you move stuff around, and how would you go to a place B, and how do we navigate from place A to place B? And tell me a little bit more about your typical flights.
Yeah, so I would say that some of those things are fairly straightforward. So typically what I do in my plane is I have a wheelchair already in the plane at all times. I have an extra travel wheelchair that I travel with, so when I'm flying I just leave it in the plane. That way at the hangar I leave the chair that I use, I just leave it at the hangar and go flying. That way I have a wheelchair in the plane. If I'm flying with someone else, things of course become much easier, because we already have the wheelchair. Wherever we go, you just take the wheelchair out. These are folding chairs, the wheels come off. You just get out easily. One of the reasons I also got the Paradise, after looking at a lot of different planes, is where the strut, the door, and the wheel is very well designed compared to a Cessna 150 or a 172 or a 182. Those planes, the strut and the door and the wheel is designed in such a weird manner that the wheelchair really can't get close to the door, because all three things are blocking it. In this plane, the wheelchair can come really close to the door. It's almost like getting into a crossover SUV. It's not that high. It's maybe 6 inches higher than what the regular wheelchair seat height is. So it's not too difficult to get in and get out. I would still have loved to find a plane that was even lower to the ground, to be honest. I looked at a bunch of planes, but the ones that were lower and nicer didn't have hand controls. So there's all those factors that most normal pilots don't need to worry about. So hand controls, space for the wheelchair, and also ease of getting in and out. It's hard to find a plane with all three combinations.
So do you typically fly alone, or do you typically fly with someone else?
I typically, when I'm doing, that's the other part of owning a plane that has been quite a learning experience. After the first 30 hours or so, I started having a lot of engine issues with this particular plane that I have. It's a Rotax 912 engine. I had engine roughness issued. I had all kinds of things that took me quite a while to get sorted out. There's still a little misfire issue that I'm troubleshooting, which I'm trying to still figure out with the 2 Rotax technicians. So again, it's my plane, so I have to get it fixed. If I was renting, if that was an option, it would be much easier. So been mostly flying in and around California now. I'm hoping once these issues are sorted out, I just wish the manufacturer and the person that I bought the plane from was a little bit more supportive, but just things you got to deal with, right? So I'm trying to, once that gets done, I definitely want to fly to Oshkosh. I want to go to Buckeye. I want to do a lot more cross-country flights, even if it's not coast to coast. I definitely want to fly a lot more. I want to fly. My next trip that I want to do is Paso Robles, San Diego, LA, and then fly up to Oregon, Seattle. I definitely want to do that. Sedona is on my list. So those are the first few somewhat close 5-6 hour long flight destinations that I want to do next. And I have a bunch of friends that are eager to go flying with me. Just want to make sure all the problems are sorted out and then start flying again. Hopefully by this summer, by the time it comes through, we should be flying a lot more.
So what are the challenges that you typically face when you are flying? It is, you mentioned like when I'm flying, I need my both hand and feet.
Right.
So
Right.
how do you manage that?
So that is, there are a few things that I have to think about. One is taxiing on the ground. Taxiing on the ground, the brakes on my plane are on the floor. So when I'm taxiing, I have one hand on the throttle and the rudders, which is on the right, and then I have differential braking on the floor. So I use the other hand for differential braking while taxiing, and I have to transition. So taking off is not that much a problem because you do the run up, you line up, you get on the runway, and then after that you don't need the brakes anymore. It's just rudder, throttle, and the yoke. But when I land, that's when I have to transition pretty. So I land, I try and bleed off as much airspeed using the elevators by keeping the stick back as much as possible when I'm doing my landing roll. And then when it's slow enough, then I switch to the brakes and let go of the yoke. The thing that I have to really worry about and think about it is if there is a lot of crosswind and you have to do wind corrections while taxiing. That is something that I worry about. So how will I do that because my hand is on the brakes and it's not on the yoke. So I try and preset the yoke configuration towards the wind, either against or into the wind or away from the wind, depending on the wind correction while taxiing that I need, and hope that it stays. But there are little things like that which you have to problem solve and figure out. Again, using flaps when you're coming into land. One thing that I had to do a lot was, even to do the flaps in this plane, I wish the flap control was on one of the sticks. That would make it easier. The flap is on the console, so I have to leave either the yoke or the rudder and use the flap control. So I tend to deploy all the flaps in the first go. Right at the beam the numbers, I deploy full flaps and then just make the whole pattern down to landing with full flaps. So I don't do little by little. So that's one thing that I have to do differently. I also practice a lot of no flap landings because I want to get good at that. In fact, I did have a flap motor issue as well on the plane. So when that conked off, I did 2 months of flying with no flaps. So I got really good at that, which was a good skill to have. The other part that I have to think about also, especially going to other airports, something that we ran into on the cross country as well from Florida to California. Some airports did not have wheelchair accessible bathrooms. So that's something you don't have to think about. There was another airport in Texas where we landed where they had crew cars so you could take, but they're not cars, they were trucks. So the truck was much higher. Thankfully, I had Alex who was with me, so he could help me get into the seat. So there are things like that which you have to think about. So I think a little bit extra planning, just like regular pilots check for, do they have fuel? Is the fuel pump operational? Is there food around? I have to do a little bit more checking to see, okay, do they have crew cars? Like this particular airport, there was not a single Uber or a Lyft or a taxi around either.
Wow.
So it wasn't like we could just call one. So those are additional things you have to think about and plan for as a wheelchair pilot.
Yeah, that definitely makes things challenging. And also I hear that you had an emergency landing, so tell me about that.
Yes, so that was interesting, and this is when I'd gotten a lot of work done on the engine already, and I thought it was now working, but this little misfire thing that we were trying to sort out was still happening. When we took off, I had a friend visiting from another state, and he wanted to go off flying. So both of us got into the plane and we were flying. I was like, yeah, this is going to be just a regular fly around for like 40 minutes and come back. Right after takeoff, as I turned crosswind and still could feel the misfire happening, and I was telling the guy, I'm like, yeah, this is weird. These misfires keep happening randomly, but it seems to be okay. Like I've gotten it tested, checked by 3 AMPs, and they're all like, this is fine. Like, not sure what it is. We're trying to figure it out, but it's flying. You can fly it. It's safe. And as we turned downwind, thankfully, I had already reached Patton altitude by then. It was 1,300 feet. Just as I turned downwind, the entire plane started shaking like crazy. And it seemed to be shaking extremely violently. And when I would throttle down, the engine would not quit. But when I throttle down, it would stop shaking. The minute I throttle up, even a little bit, even like 5%, it would start shaking violently. And so I could not use any engine power. So I had to basically cut the throttle. And this was at this airport also, you do not turn crosswind till you get to 1,000 feet. So I was really far away from the airport. Like most airports, you turn crosswind at 500 and you're still like pretty close to the airport. If that would have been the case, I could have done the whole pattern and landed, against the wind like you're supposed to normally do. But because I was already at 1,000 feet and I was pretty far away from the airport, I did a 180 and brought it back. It was fine. Bringing it back was fine. I had a little bit more energy than I should have. So the landing was a little harder than I would have liked. But still made it back fine. Were completely safe back on the runway. Just had to talk to the other traffic in the pattern to tell them to, mayday and get out and let me get the plane off the ground. They were all really nice. And people at the airport were really helpful as well. They all came out to see if there's anything else needed, but it was fine. The plane still had power. I shut it off and then shut it back on, and the engine was still running at low RPM, and I could use it to taxi back to the hangar. So finally found there was a bad ignition coil that was the cause. So that's been sorted out, but yeah, that was quite an experience to have to deal with that.
Wow, that must be nerve-wracking.
It was nerve-wracking. In fact, the guy with me was also saying, wow, you were so calm and composed through the whole thing. And funnily, just 2 days before that, I had asked my CFI here, I said, hey, it might be a good idea to go and do some emergency procedures practice, the following week. So we'd already figured out time to do emergency procedure practices again with him, because I said, I might be a little rusty, so let's do that. And I had my own emergency to deal with even before that. So I am more careful on, looking at things and making sure I'm looking at all the engine gauges and, alternate fields and where would I land a little bit more after this. More careful for sure than I was.
So you did have a little bit of power when you did the 180.
It was, but anything more than it was just running on idle. The minute I would put it up even 1 or 2% above idle, it would start violently shaking again. So it was running but not giving much at all.
Pretty much glided your way back to the airport.
Pretty much, yeah. I had a bit of a tailwind. That's why I came with a bit too much energy. Right.
So when you talk to people, do you try to inspire them, tell them your story and how?
So I recently posted on a bunch of Facebook groups that have wheelchair users. There are a few wheelchair communities on Facebook. And when I posted the fact that, look, this is something you can do if you want, at least 25 to 30 people that have reached out to me individually saying, I always wanted to be a pilot, or I was a pilot before my accident, or I was a pilot in the Air Force or the Navy, and I never thought I would be getting back to flying. A lot of people don't know about the sport pilot certificate, so they feel they can never get the medical. So the information is very limited in the community. So I've been trying to talk to them, give them information, post in more places, and just try and spread the word, because for someone who gets to be in a wheelchair after an accident or illness or amputation or some kind of an issue, it's a pretty dramatic confidence builder to be able to do anything that's above and beyond even what most people can get to do. So my whole goal is, even if I can inspire 1 or 2 people in 2024 to take up their flying training and get their pilot's license, I would consider that a win. But I think it's going to be more than that, because I even got calls from a guy in India. He reached out to me saying, "Hey, I'm in Mumbai. I got so inspired looking at your story and your video because I got into an accident 3 years ago and I'm completely demotivated with life. And when I saw what you're doing, I'm so motivated about what can be done. But how do I build my confidence?" So I talked to him. I'm like, "Dude, get into driving. If you were driving before and that was something you did, get back into that first step. Start doing these things, because it's pretty normal for anybody who meets with an accident of some sort and gets into a wheelchair to be extremely demoralized. It's just a natural thing that happens to all of us, right? So how do you show them that life does not end? And I'm not the only one. Even just in the US, Able Flight has graduated, like I said, almost 100 pilots. In spite of, besides that, there must be at least another 500 or 600 wheelchair pilots just in the US. All over the world, there would be at least 1,000 of us. So I'm just one of them. But I'm just trying to get the word out to say it's something that you will feel really good about, and it's something you can do. And there are organizations that are willing to help you go do that. All make full use of it.
No, that's pretty amazing. So I hope that this video finds some more people, help spread the word. And I really hope that more people will find this video and go take their pilot training and be inspired. But this is pretty amazing, Ash, and thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate that. Tell me your social links. Like, I know you've been posting on Instagram and all those things, so where people can find you and how they can follow you.
Yes, my Instagram is flying_wheelies. That's a take on most people in wheelchairs do wheelies, so these are flying wheelies. And my YouTube channel is also flying wheelies, but I mostly post on Instagram. @flying wheelies with an underscore in between.
Thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to? Did I miss something that you want to share?
No, I just want to thank you, Krish, for inviting me to do this, and for also all the great work you're doing with all the pilots and all the different pilot communities here in the US. It's really admirable. So thank you for getting us all together. We all benefit and learn from each other.
Yes, I mean, I hope to meet you sometime. Like, if I come to California, or when I come to California, I'll definitely give you a buzz. But I am in Atlanta right now, where all your journey has started. So
yes,
if you end up coming back here, I would love to meet you and go for a dinner or talk more about airplanes and things like that. And or maybe Oshkosh, right? You wanted to do that, and let's just realize it. So let's meet at Oshkosh this year.
That would be a good thing to do. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you for watching the video, and thank you, Ash, for being on the channel. Like Ash said, he would like to inspire more people with disabilities and learning to fly. There are 3 ways in which you can support Ash. 1, going directly to Able Flight and donating. 2, supporting me on this channel. Any money that I make on this video now or in the future will go in support of Able Flight. 3, by supporting Flying Ice Optics. You can get 10% off when you make a purchase on Flying Ice glasses using my link below, and any commission that I make on your purchase would go directly to support Able Flight.